the micro movements are generated by cold fronts, wind changes, things like that. That'll get this buck from moving from this bed to this point, the bed in a different location or something like that, So we're not dealing with that. We're dealing with like, okay, early season I need to be hunting here, and as that season changes, the foliage changes, those deer migrate to a different location. If things are the same, I can expect the same result next year, So
Yeah.
I'm not sitting in an area just because I like the way it looks, or I feel like there's going to be deer there. I'm actually following the progression of how the deer are interacting and where the movement is going from. And that can change year to year, but you're probably not going to see those like wide variations. Like they're not going to go from suddenly using ridge tops in October to, they're all in the bottom. Like that's probably not going to happen. It's probably going to be more of a gradual change. And if you can identify those little points, like, okay, I went and pulled this camera here. There's nothing really using this right now. But I know in like last year they were using it next week, and I go up top and they're that I pull a couple cameras there, and that movement up there is not as much as it was the week before. Well, they're probably migrating back down, and they just hadn't made that
Yeah.
full move back down to the bottom yet. So, okay, next weekend, that's, I probably need to be, I don't need to hunt up top because that's kind of fading off and they're moving to that lower elevation, So it's kind of one of those things. And that's what I try to do with my cameras, is just get that progression of where those deer are moving. And it's just like an ebb and a flow, within the woods. And then the rut kicks in and everything goes,
Everything goes haywire.
Yep.
Yeah. Did you say, you broke up there for a second, but did you say you hate the rut?
I do. Yeah. As far as camera stuff, because it's just like, like I can't make any assumptions, that then I've got to go back to just, I'm accidentally running into that buck,
Yeah. Yeah. And finding those areas you think either they're going to travel between or the doe beddings or whatever to be able to do that. No. And, when it comes to, analyzing that intel and using that and then going in and breaking down these spots. And I think that's where, for me, and I heard you say it a couple times here, is like, it's so important to cover basically every square inch of those areas to try to uncover those things. And I feel like, I have a goal every year to do at least 200 miles in March and April of hiking through different areas and checking things out. And that's still a goal. But one thing that I've learned is sometimes I was just doing things just to do it, just to be like, okay, I covered this area, where being more intentful on when I get to a spot that looks kind of curious or looks kind of deery, like bucky, like it could, some buck could be living here, of spending more time and just sitting there, even sitting down, having a snack and just looking at the woods and trying to figure out those micro changes, because it is easy to go out and scout and find sign in the spring and do that. But unless you're trying to use that to put a game plan together, now, like, there's things that are going to change and be able to adapt, but being able to pick a tree, if this spot is the same as it was the previous year, this time of year, and I want to hunt it, well, I should have a tree picked out and look at it and try to find a good tree at that time of year. And there's always variables that are going to change, but this gets you another level up. And then plan like, okay, how can I access this spot? And you're looking at it, it's like, okay, on a map, it looks like that drainage would be good, but man, there's so many blowdowns in there and it's kind of rocky, and I don't know if I can actually even come up that. Well, let me see what backup plans I have and start to plan that stuff out. So now, if things are on trend to be similar that coming year, the sign's telling you need to be in there. You don't need to try to start from ground zero and, blow deer out with your access, or you can't find a tree, and every year that's something that I need to get a little bit better with, and trying to really hone in some of those spots within an area versus just covering as much ground as possible, but, covering it well with intent and looking at it from. Another thing too that I think that you can get lost with, especially, if you have a limited time when you can hunt, say you're planning on just hunting. You have, you have weekends, and then say you take off the first week of November or whatever. Scout with that in mind of like, this is the time of year to help do it versus trying to look at it from a whole big scale. It can be tough to take in all that information versus kind of focus scouting.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It like we're talking about going into new areas and stuff like that. If you're scouting an area that you're unfamiliar with, it's okay to try to learn as much of it as you can, but dial it back when you're starting to see the sign on there. I think you need to be a much more strategic scouter. Like I'm trying to transition from being kind of methodical in both, methodical hunter, methodical scouter, to being a more strategic scouter and more strategic hunter. Just because, I mean, as you get, a lot of us, I mean, I think if you're a weekend warrior, you got to be that. If all you have is the weekends to do your hunting, you better be a strategic hunter. You better be a strategic scouter. Meaning, I go into the woods to scout for a specific thing that I'm trying to find, and I'm going into the woods to do the same thing, like almost like with the mindset of you trying to make it happen every time you're out there, and that's kind of the way a lot of people are broad brushing scouting. Like I'm just going to try to cover as much ground as I can just for the sake of doing it, and instead of just breaking down these little micro parts of the woods that mean the most to the buck that you're trying to kill. Like all this fluff stuff that's in the woods don't mean crap to him. It's these little micro things that you kind of walk by when you're just trying to cover ground that I think gets a lot of people lost, and I'm just like you. I've taken the mindset. That's why I think I've told my buddies that I think I scout differently than most people and when I take people scouting with me, I kind of scout like they do, so it's like, well, you're not doing anything any differently. It's because you're with me and I don't feel like I can be, who I really am, because you'd think I'm a nut. I'm sitting here in the woods like looking like, okay, I can visualize a buck coming here. Now, where can I visualize him going once he's through this little area? Like I probably like an idiot because I'm literally scanning the woods, and turning around and sitting. I may sit here for a little bit, and I may go over there and get a different perspective of it, and it's not. I don't feel like it's kind of abstract, kind of scouting. Yeah. But that's just how I feel like I need to do it, because I don't know. My dad was big into Indian stuff, and I think I've taken on that a little more than as I've gotten older. A little more of that. Of going through the woods, kind of like an Indian woodback, trying to stalk their prey, and that's kind of the way he was. And I've morphed more toward that as I've gotten older, because I feel like you have to get in tune with the woods when you go out in them. Like you got to become part of the forest itself to figure out what the deer or whatever you're after is doing within the area that you're in, because that's their home and you're entering it. It's just like I know my way around my house. Well, I need to know the woods the same way the deer knows, because that's his house. That's his home.